Hello, and thank you for watching the Georgia Voice of College Football. I'm your host, Matt Green, and today we have some breaking news, and that is that Carson Beck is going to be entering the transfer portal. This comes, about a week after Carson Beck announced that he was going to be declared for the NFL draft, and we talked about it here on the show when it happened. That I was kind of relieved because this was kind of a rumor that had been flying around for a little bit of maybe Beck comes back to college, but it's not to Georgia. The surgery is only supposed to take 6-7 month recovery. I think that's what Brock Purdy was. So maybe he's ready by the next college football season. And I was relieved that we're not going to see Carson Beck in another college football jersey, and not so fast, my friend, as the great Lee Corso would say, because Carson Beck is now staying in college and entering his name into the transfer portal. So what does this mean? We knew Beck had the option of coming back, had 1 year of eligibility left, and decided to enter his name in the draft. Now that he's putting his name in the portal, I think most think it only means one thing. And there's only one program that I know of off the top of my head. Obviously, there's teams out there that have thrown some money to players on their current roster and convinced them to stay for another year. I think Georgia was one of those a year ago with Carson Beck. I think this guy could have left last year and been a first rounder, but instead he stays at Georgia. But that's a tangent because the only program that I know of that has convinced a guy to not go to the NFL and instead transfer to their program is the Miami Hurricanes and Cam Ward a year ago. You heard Cam Ward was going to go to the draft, probably be a first round pick after a couple good years at Washington State. And then guy ends up at Miami, and I would say he did himself a good favor by ending up at Miami. I mean, this guy's probably going to be a top 5, top 10 pick, maybe the number 1 overall pick, with the opinions of Shedeur Sanders kind of fluctuating if you believe what you hear. This is NFL draft rumor season, so you never know what's true and what's not. But yeah, he's got connections with the state of Florida, from Jacksonville, and obviously his infamous girlfriend, that Georgia fans love to hate on so much, is plays basketball for Miami. So the connections were there with Miami. That's not official by any means, but it feels like just the worst kept secret, right? Like Miami is that team that's willing to break the bank for a big time quarterback. And I mean, just the era we live in now with the transfer portal, like you have to think about how different the staying in college and the NIL is compared to becoming a rookie and going to the NFL. Like before, it was like, okay, it doesn't really matter what college can do for you. You go to the NFL and get paid. Maybe you're not the starter, but you start learning on the job and getting paid. Like there's 32 NFL teams. There's like a solid 60 something Power 4 schools, and there's very limited number of big time established quarterbacks that are in the transfer portal right now. So it's like you got like 2 or 3 guys with about 50-60 spots. Like that guy's probably going to make more money than a guy who's a second or third round pick in the NFL draft. Like I think I personally thought there was still a chance Beck could go first round, simply because teams convince themselves all the time in the NFL to draft that quarterbacks are worth first round picks. And I mean, you saw JJ McCarthy and Bo Nix go first round a year ago. And I mean, if Beck was out in last year's class, like I don't necessarily think either of those guys were better than Carson Beck coming out of 2023. So they did have more experience. Beck only had the 1 year as a starter, and teams like there's that new kind of philosophy that teams want to see 25 starts. I think is that magic number. They want to see a guy in college. So maybe that is what it is. I think there's an argument being made now that like he didn't get the NFL draft grade that he wanted. And that's definitely possible, but I think that kind of understates how powerful NIL is right now in 2024 and 2025, I should say. Like, I think it was Pete Nakos that he may have been the one that first reported it. oh man, I'm blanking on Pete Thamel, the other one that I saw reporting it. Um, Pete Nakos, I think, speculated that he's going to be like the highest paid portal player like ever, which definitely could happen. This is obviously ever is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in that sentence, because it's like a 2 or 3 year like ever, right? So, but yeah, I mean, that's what it is. When you can get a proven commodity at quarterback, which I think that's what Carson Beck is, I mean, teams are willing to pay for it. So, it remains to be seen, what happens with Beck and everything. But yeah, it's I would say Miami feels like the logical team, but yeah, and that's what I was kind of in the middle of saying. Like, I don't think returning for your senior year in college just means the NFL prospects weren't where it was, like, or weren't where you wanted them to be. Like, that's definitely possible, but I personally think, like, just in general, you know, uh philosophy, you just probably, the saying strike while the iron's hot. I don't know what the opposite of that. Don't strike while the iron's cold. Like, I don't know the exact opposite, but that's kind of like if you go back to 2019 with Jake Fromm. Like, Jake Fromm was coming off his worst season in college, and then he decides to go pro. It's like, this is a guy who was talked about as like a borderline first rounder going into 2019. And then I don't even know where Fromm got drafted off the top of my head. It was like fourth, fifth round or something like that. Where did Jake Fromm? He did get drafted though, right? Am I misremembering Jake Fromm at the NFL draft? Yeah, fifth round. The Bills took him in the fifth round. Okay, I was starting to, I was like, maybe he did go undrafted. Okay. So yeah, Fromm went in the fifth round when his stock was at an all-time low. And Carson Beck's stock is definitely, to compare it to Jake Fromm, Carson Beck's stock is definitely lower right now today than it was the second the season started. And in general, it's just probably, not a good idea to go pro when you have eligibility left, when your stock is lower than it was when your final year in college started. So I do understand that aspect of him coming back to college. But like I was kind of saying, I think there's a chance, if he is a second round pick, which is still very respectable, being a top 50, 60 pick in the NFL draft, that guy's not making as much money as the highest paid quarterback in the transfer portal in college. Like, I think it's a new era we live in today. And to maximize your, earnings as a college quarterback, as just a athlete, as an athlete, um, that saying it one more year in college was actually the best financial move for you. This is just not a territory that we're used to. And I think there's a good chance that's what's going on here. And then there's the added bonus of, you get more money at Miami than you would to play in college, or than you would to play in the pros in 2025. And then, oh yeah, your stock also could go up, and you could be a much higher draft pick in 2026. I think all of those things are on the table for for Carson Beck. And I mean, it's a understandable, but unfortunate decision from a Georgia perspective. But speaking of the Georgia perspective, I mean, what does this mean for Georgia? Like, Beck did have the option to play one more year. So the fact that he's coming back to college and he's not going to play at Georgia, does that mean Georgia didn't want Carson Beck back? Is this a mutual decision? Is Beck frustrated by his final year at Georgia and he wants to go somewhere else? I think that remains to be seen. I personally don't like to speculate. I think there's some saying that this may have been a mutual decision. That Georgia didn't really like how Beck dealt with his injury at the end of this season. Like, he wasn't in contact with the staff. I think I heard Roddy Nabolsi reporting that. You know, that might be the case. I don't know that personally. Maybe from a Georgia fan perspective, it's like, this guy, he was a very polarizing player from the fan perspective when Georgia's dealing with all these speeding tickets and everything, and your quarterback's driving around in a Lambo. That's not always the best look. Making TikTok videos, like, yeah, there's a bunch of old heads that are upset about that. Like, I don't really care about that sort of stuff. I kind of felt like that was overrated fan stuff, but the optics are what they are. And maybe he wasn't the leader that a Stetson Bennett was, that a Gunnar Stockton can be, but I don't think any of us fans truly know that. So I'm not going to run with narratives like that. But I mean, I think you could read between the lines and say maybe Georgia's just that confident about their quarterback room in 2025. Like, I watched, we've seen Gunnar Stockton start one game in his career, and he played fine. He wasn't great. I tend to think if I could have one guy for 2025, you give me the choice of Gunnar Stockton or Carson Beck, I'm taking Carson Beck. But Gunnar Stockton played well enough to win that Notre Dame game. We don't need to rehash what happened with the offense in that game. But you got Gunnar Stockton coming back. You got Ryan Puglisi had passed Jaden Rashada on the depth chart as a true freshman, and then you got Ryan Montgomery, the 4-star top 150 player or so in the country, coming in this year, as well as Hezekiah Malinder, the Athens kid, also who signed with Georgia late in the process. So maybe Georgia feels good about their 2025 quarterback room. They also might hit the portal for another guy just to stack experience and keep an open competition in this room. But it's definitely interesting, to say the least, that Carson Beck had the potential to come back to school, and he didn't want to do it at Georgia. And so to that next point, if Beck does choose Miami, like, this is just my personal opinion. He's playing against worse competition. I assume his receivers, and I don't know the Miami's receivers were great or anything this year. I just assume that Miami's receivers aren't going to drop 37 passes this year. They're not going to lead the nation in drops, and maybe they do, but I'm going to assume that probably doesn't happen. I think we stopped counting. I don't even know if it was at 37. We were just like, it's too many. We get it. We're first. We're worst, whatever you want to call it, in the nation in drops. So assuming, and obviously that's assuming Carson Beck's health and he's able to play, he's able to be ready by the season. But if that's the case, like, I fully expect Beck to lead Miami to an ACC title, be a Heisman finalist type guy, like essentially the same goals they had with Cam Ward this year. I think they can do the same thing with Carson Beck. Ultimately, I think I'm just bummed because of what this does to Carson Beck's UGA legacy. Like, I think you can call me a Carson Beck apologist if you want. I've been kind of defending him all season. Gave you my list. If you listen, for those who listen to our live show every Tuesday night, I gave you my list where Beck ranks on my 21st century UGA quarterback tiers. Like, I think he's one of the best quarterbacks who's played at UGA in recent history. And I mean, in the history of the program, like, Carson Beck was a super talented quarterback. And also in this NIL transfer portal era, like, Beck's a guy who waited around 3 years. Like, he didn't transfer the first chance that he was not named the starter. This guy worked hard and he balled out, and when he became the starter at UGA. Like, this in 2023, I think, is one of, like, the most prolific seasons a quarterback has ever had at Georgia, as far as I'm concerned. Like, a lot of people want to talk about Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. Like, that's the only reason Beck was good. Like, Bowers missed 4 games in 2023. McConkey missed 5 games in 2023. And that really doesn't include the other games that McConkey played, but he was banged up. Like, this team, Carson Beck was really, really good last year. And it wasn't always like because of how great his weapons were. Bowers is generational talent. Don't get me wrong. McConkey is great as well. But look at a good quarterback, a great quarterback for that matter, and tell me who his weapons were in college. Like, almost every great quarterback in college had some damn good wide receivers to throw to. George, I think, just had especially bad receiver, and I don't even think they're that bad of receivers. They just collectively had a really bad season. Like, there's no argument there. You lead the nation in drops, it's not a good season. So Georgia just won the SEC championship in a year where they had a bad run game, got bad receiver play, had a below average offensive line, and were playing the toughest schedule in college football. not one of the toughest either, like the toughest schedule in college football. And I think Carson Beck is a massive reason why Kirby Smart was able to win his third conference title and why UGA was able to win their 15th conference title in school history. Like, I truly believe that Carson Beck is still one of the best quarterbacks in college football. I think that's what makes it frustrating. I think if he is a Miami Hurricane, Miami is their sights are basically the same in 2025 as they were in 2024. But with how toxic this fan base had kind of become towards him, and just reading into all the body language stuff and everything, and what he's doing off the field and all like that, feels like it might just be the best time, like, for all parties, just to move on. But that's all I got. I appreciate everyone tuning in to the Georgia Voice of College Football. We do this every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Have a live show, as well as instant reactions to every post game show, as well as some breaking news, one-off episodes that we'll do like this. So please follow me on Twitter at Matt_W_Green. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.